That's fine. Yep. All right, now we're recording. So I've got the agenda up, and it does say to start with an opening prayer, I guess. Does anyone want to start? Or
I can do it.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
You won. Go for it, Parker.
Okay, I got it. Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this day. We're thankful for this opportunity we have to meet together as our organizational leadership class, and we're so grateful for the chance we have to meet one another and the chance we have to learn from one another. And we pray that as we talk tonight, that we'll be able to gain insight from one another and ultimately become better friends. And we love thee so much, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 All right. So got the prayer going, and then all right, so discuss the following questions and any others that come to mind. From your personal experience, what have been key behaviors in effective teams?
Communication.
Mm.
That's a big one. People know how to communicate, even if they have different, whether they value everything the same way or not, they know how to still communicate it so that it doesn't offend other people, but also so that it gets to the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just thinking about like where I work at a steel construction company, and we got a lot of diverse personalities. We've got a lot of people that work out in the field. So we do a lot of like steel buildings, steel structures for like government jobs and commercial jobs and things. So got these people that work out in the field, and there's kind of that culture that goes there. And then we have all our managers and the owners who work together, and a lot of them have engineering degrees. And I jokingly call them the Cal Poly brains because they all went to the school called Cal Poly Pomona. And, they have their expectations and things like that. And, everyone has their different personalities, and everyone's in their different departments, and every department needs stuff from each other. So it's like, okay, well, I need this to get paid so I can get this order placed so we can get a job going. And it just kind of goes in this like circle, and it can get really stressful. Like we're kind of in a crunch like that right now, where it's like, we got to get all these things going. So gears are kind of grinding, but it's like, everyone has to kind of communicate like, okay, I can't do this because of A, B, or C, or I need you to do this because of EFG or whatever. So it makes it easier when one, things are communicated, but two, also when the right people are communicated to, because a lot of slumps can happen and delays can happen that cause issues and further frustrations is what I've noticed.
Right.
Not that we're an overly frustrated company, we're just kind of crazy and always busy.
Right. I can kind of get that. My husband, he works I'm actually here at the office. It's a small place, but we do fire protection. And so he works on the field, but his dad is the founder. So he revamped a house into an office space. So right now I'm on the side where another bookkeeping company is staying in the same building. And it's really easy for them because they're always running back and forth between his side of the building and our side of the building. And he's always asking questions, stuff about different jobs. So, yeah. There's a lot of pressure at points during the construction process.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think another thing is just being willing to be flexible, like within a team. Like lots of times, I'm trying to think. Well, actually, this is a perfect example. I was supposed to have I work on campus. I was supposed to have a meeting today at 12:30, and I had a haircut at 12. So I got a haircut, and it kind of went long. Like I got in late, and I totally spaced my meeting because I was like, I have so much homework to do, whatever. But thankfully, it wasn't a big deal. And my boss called me and was like, hey, like, where you at? And I was like, oh, shoot, we have a meeting. And he was like, oh, it's totally fine. Like, and I was able to, go to work, and then we were able to still have the meeting. And obviously this is kind of a different example, because I don't know if in the real world, in a like actual job, if blowing off a meeting like that would be acceptable. I don't think it really would fly, but I think just being able to adapt on the fly, and be able to make adjustments to other people's circumstances, things like that. So
I think you brought up an interesting point with like adaptability and whatnot. I think because the question is asking about like key behaviors, and I think consistency is really important. Like I was talking with, she's a good friend of mine, but she also works with me too. But I don't remember what we were talking about per se, but I made a joke about doing something not very smart or whatever about work, just kind of blowing something off, but like intentionally. And I was joking about it because someone else I think had done it as well. But it's like, yeah, it's not like I can just do that and get away with it, But she made a comment like, well, you have a better track record or whatever. But I think consistency says a lot too, like stuff happens. And I think for you, Parker, like if people aren't understand who you are and realize like, it was just because of and whatnot, like you kind of have that proven trust. I think that does affect a lot of things. So trust is a huge thing too in teams. Like it's so much easier to get around problems when people trust each other, because it's like stuff does happen, but there's those people who have family emergencies all the time and they call off work or they can't come do stuff, they can't fulfill commitments. And I've seen this at church and school and work and stuff. It happens anywhere, but some people it's like, it's fine, whatever, but they do have that good track record of being consistent and trustworthy. So I think those are big elements that make a successful team, like people that can rely on each other, like even if something falls through the cracks just a little bit. Not that we want it to, but.
Right.
Yeah, I think another thing that contributes to a good team is, in addition to being flexible, realizing that there's more than one way to do something, to have the desired outcome. So just being open-minded and, letting people voice their opinion or concerns and just working through those.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I like that. Next question. What do group norms have to do with effective team building? What would you say your current group norms include? Unspoken and spoken norms. Are they healthy group norms? If not, what could be changed? Being that we've only been in a group for a very brief time, it's kind of hard to answer, but.
I know in the past, like just say like young men, young women's, there was always like a group norm of these people go with these people and these people go with those people, and it was like segregation. Mm-hmm. And that would prevent us a lot from collaborating and really working together in certain situations. So there's that in a small scenario.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just mentioning something I've seen too, that kind of what Dora said kind of made me think of this. Like a lot of times you have the same kind of people who volunteer to do things. Usually they're the more dependable people. And I think that kind of creates little cultures like, oh, well, so-and-so always handles this. Like, even if it's not an official task that they're delegated, but it's like, well, like just using your guys' names, it's like, well, Dora always handles this kind of paperwork, just ask her about it, instead of like everybody being in like the loop. So that's kind of like a more negative norm, because that can kind of lead to complacency, I think. So complacency, I think, is the word I'm wanting to get at. Like, I think people kind of get used to things, and it's like, if something happens that's abnormal, it's like, well, what do I do? Oh my goodness, like I can't handle the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just closely related to that is obviously sometimes it hasn't happened as much in college, I don't feel like, but get group and one person always does all the work or something, where the bulk of the work or they're always volunteering to do the bulk of the research, and everybody else kind of closely related to what you were saying, Suzanne, like, Suzanne does this, Dora does this, Ernesto does this, and like I do this. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. And like, I guess on top of like what could be done to change those kind of things, I think initiative is a huge part of that. Like, yeah, there are those people who are like, well, I'll just do it. Like, they do have that dependable attribute to them and that initiative. And I think if everybody puts in that same initiative, like maybe they don't end up doing it and they do something else. But I think just that initiative to have that drive, that initiative to have initiative is a huge factor into it too. Because if everyone's on the same page, like in our group discussion now, you know, all four of us are contributing, for example, like that makes a big difference. Whereas if you have a group where only two of the people are talking, the other two are just kind of, I don't know. If everyone clues in, I think it really changes the atmosphere and the nature of your work too.
That's kind of like something from the Ricardo Semler scenario that we read like last week. But I thought it was so cool how he created this whole hotel where everybody knew how to do everyone's job. And so they would constantly rotate people. And so no matter who you went up to talk to, they could solve your problem right then and there. And it saves so much time. You didn't have to go and pull someone out of whatever they were doing, and then that stops what they were doing or anything like that. It just frees things up so well. So
yeah, and along those lines, Dora, I think it's important to have everybody understand what's expected. But I also think it's important to have, you know, people that specialize in certain things. In several of the groups that I've had over the last few semesters, we would rotate responsibilities, whether that was the group leader, the editor, or whatever it may be, project manager. And, you know, those tasks were rotated every week so that everybody was expected to do those tasks, but maybe just not every week. And that just helped, you know, people that maybe didn't take as much initiative as others. It gave them an opportunity to kind of, you know, step into those shoes and take on a little bit more responsibility. And I think it just helps everybody grow in maybe areas that they're maybe a little deficient in.
Great. That came to mind too as I thought about that case, because they did have like massage therapists. And so if they were like, hey, clerk guy, you gotta go massage some people, I'd be like, what? Like, get out of town. I don't have licenses for this. Yeah. There's definitely a need for certain skills to just be within certain skills.
I think a healthy alternative to that, or antidote to that kind of problem, would be just having a set procedure. At our company, we've been talking about getting good systems in place, not to make things like rigid, but just so everybody knows how to handle a situation. It's like, okay, it just becomes intuitive, you know, like, okay, when situation A happens, so-and-so generally will do this, but so-and-so will know how else to handle it in case they're gone or whatever. Right. But just having that procedure that is simple enough to follow. So maybe if massage therapist 1 is out or whatever, okay, so-and-so's not in, but I'm here and I can set up an appointment for you for the next time they're in, like just using that example, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good one. Just having a protocol kind of figured out, I guess.
Yeah.
Nice. Was there anything else to that question?
Let's see, covering unspoken and spoken norms. Are they healthy group norms? If not, what could be changed? Kind of went over some things. So unless anyone else had other examples.
I don't know. I just kind of think it sounds cliche, but I think what makes a good team is just teamwork, right? Just like being willing to, you know, pick up the slack when somebody, you know, is unable to do something, or, you know, just being able to work on the fly and make adjustments and work as a team. I think that's honestly what teamwork is. So
I heard something once, and it can kind of be tied into this, but it was a phrase of basic, like, the struggle you make today will ease the strife you have tomorrow. So basically, the more you prepared you are now and get yourself prepared for it, like, the less stressful and hecticness will happen the next day. And I think it's a culture that I think culture is a huge thing. Like, if people have that expectation, was the word Ernesto used earlier, like, okay, we need to do this, you know, obviously stuff might fall through because of blah, blah, blah. If we have this expectation, we need to do this because of this and that. I think people will be much more effective workers because they have that expectation placed on them, that deadline, those weights almost, and
Mm-hmm.
they just know how to handle things, I think.
Yeah. Good point.
How does psychological safety in a team increase overall effectiveness? What are the roles of communication and empathy in creating psychological safety?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is what he wants us to talk about, but when I think of psychological safety, I just think of, everybody being comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
everybody being willing to, be themselves and open up and, contribute the way that they're capable of. And I think being able to do that just changes the whole dynamic of the group, kind of how we've already talked about. Everybody has something they can add to the group. And so if we're all, I guess, comfortable, then that's the right place to start.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, like in the case, it was interesting reading about, it was Simon Rourke, I think. He was the one having all the issues with people, but his VP, she was saying that she even noticed in meetings where he'd present his ideas that his team would be like kind of subdued and like they just wanted the meeting to be over because they didn't like working with him that much. And so like it was his loss in that kind of situation, because if you're not utilizing the opinions and input from all of the people in your group, then the out effect is only what he has to offer. It's not what the whole group has to offer. And so it's his loss.
Yeah. It's interesting. So when I first, within the first year of the company I was working at there, so there's a project manager who's still there, and he kind of seems like an intimidating personality when you don't know him, because he's like super freaking tall, and he kind of talks over people sometimes and talks at you, if that makes sense. And we had another person who worked in the office with me, and she's super opinionated and kind of butts heads with people easily. And so these two personalities were just not very good together. And for a while I kind of felt similar towards him, like, okay, it's really stressful talking to him. He just talks at me and tells me to do this stuff, and it's like, well, how am I supposed to know this? I have none of this information available, and I'm still kind of new. And I don't know at what point in time it was. Is a few months in or a little longer, between like not quite 6 months, I think, working there. But it's like, okay, he drives me nuts, but I'm gonna try and just go the extra mile to be nice to him. And because like sometimes he'd be very generous and friendly and stuff, but other times it was just like, I don't want to talk to you, and I'd avoid it. But anyways, I don't know if this really made a difference so much, but at least for me, like, I felt better. Like, he can still be difficult to talk to, but I made all this extra effort just to be like, okay, I'm going to be accommodating. I'm going to try and be helpful and make it easier to want to help him in a sense. So, and that changed a lot of things, and I get along really well with him. I mean, sometimes, I might be like, Chris, I can't do this, but he's awesome, and he's been supportive with a lot of things within work and outside. So I don't know. I think that initiative to just make the, environment healthier is also on you too. Like, I've also heard, like, a business will get better starting with you, and maybe you're just a worker, maybe you're the owner, maybe you're a manager, whatever. But for me in that situation, I improved that relationship, which is kind of crucial because I have to work with him a lot, but it just made a big difference with how I felt. And for this other person who never really tried too much, like gave up after a little while trying to be friendlier, it didn't work out, and she's not even working there anymore. But I don't know. The way you work with people has a huge effect. So if people don't like you and you don't like other people, you're not going to be very effective or enjoy yourself.
I think what it really comes down to is showing mutual respect to one another. I work in marketing, and oftentimes in marketing meetings, a creative team comes together and kind of, does a pitch session and talking about different campaigns that we can put together for clients and so on. And And I think it's important to just value everyone's opinion. And obviously you have the leader of the group, the marketing director, who has to kind of take everything and kind of provide some guidance. As long as you don't do it in a condescending or patronizing way, demeaning, employees or looking down on your subordinates, I think that they respect you a lot more. And that's really where you get the best work out of people, is when they feel like they're respected and valued.
Yeah.
Feeling valued is like so important at work. I've been in so many different areas where I just did not feel appreciated, and the quality of your work just drops. It's just, you don't even care anymore. You just want to go home.
Yeah. I used to work at a staffing company. I was there for a couple years before this job I'm at now, and both companies are really stressful, but it's so interesting how like rewards will outweigh the negativity depending on your relationships with people. So first company I worked with, I knew the owners. They were actually from church. Like, they used to be in the same ward as me a long time ago. And there's just a lot of stuff that between their employees that, I don't know, just not disciplining certain employees for things that they didn't like doing, but it's like everyone else had to take the heat for dumb little mistakes. And that was really hard for me. I just, so much anxiety with that work atmosphere, and some things got better after a while, but I don't know. I've been in both situations, but just not taking advantage of other people's hard work is a big thing too, because there's another guy that worked there, and he and I worked super hard, and we would feel the fire of the urgency from people's needs, like to fill job positions and work on it really hard. But a lot of people would kind of rely on that work too, and I feel like the owners didn't really have a big understanding of what was going on in the field, so to speak. So that made it tricky, and you felt really underappreciated a lot. But this company I'm in now, it's very demanding, but I think communication and expectations are, sometimes not perfectly stated, but the rewards are a lot better, because I think there's a lot more investment in employees, and like very personal investments and encouragement that comes from the employers. And I think that makes a huge difference. It's definitely not an easier company to work for, but it's, I don't know, there's just, the personal relationships are a lot more, I can't think of the word right now. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to be long-winded.
Like symbiotic.
Yeah. The ability and accessibility to the owners to communicate better is there, and you can say what you mean and mean what you say, and not have to like sugarcoat everything. Like, people there are very blunt. So really excessively blunt, but I can say this is a bad situation and I can't do it because of blah, blah, blah. And I would not have been comfortable with the other company. So thank you for bringing that word. How would you guys, so I was in a situation where I had an office assistant who really sincere desire to do a good job, but he did not do a good job. And it was really hard to train him and like retrain him, because it's like he'd keep forgetting it. He just did not have good memory of how to do really basic tasks, and I ended up firing him after a while. And I felt really bad about it.
That must have been so hard.
It was like, he's a good friend of mine still. Like, I talked to him outside and there's no hard feelings or anything, but I was just like, oh, I really wanted this mentoring opportunity. I wanted to help you kind of get on your feet. And he was someone I knew, and I was like, well, you've had a hard time with work, and maybe if I can help you specifically with this really basic job, I can help you. It was really rough. So, but again, no hard feelings. But it's like, how do you guys mesh that good balance of not being condescending and being like, you need to do this better, or with someone who isn't getting it? I mean, yeah, I fired him in the end, but like, what, in your opinion, is the best way to handle that? Because I don't have a lot of patience.
I think it's a matter of setting realistic expectations. I mean, if somebody's been trained, 3 or 4 times on the same process, either the process isn't clear, perhaps the individual training them isn't, an effective teacher, or maybe the person just, doesn't have the interest to learn the process. So I think it really depends on, the situation in that regard. If it's a person that is truly, invested in trying to do a good job, it's been my experience that sometimes you have to redo a process because it's okay. Here's the way to train somebody, and by the end of the training, they're still not getting it, and you do the training over and over. Then it's a broken process at that point. So that you can go back and fix the process. But if it's a person just being lax, not paying attention as you're going through the training, then I think that's a different conversation altogether.
No.
I think too. I was going over the constructive criticism part of the PowerPoint that we went over for the case write-up, and one of the things that stuck out to me was, oh shoot, I just forgot it. Let's see if that'll come back to me really fast. One of the things that stuck out to me was just like figuring out or pointing out what the person does that is good. And so kind of like how Ernesto was saying, maybe they're not good at the process or good at that specific task, but being able to step back and say, okay, this person is good at such and such task, or they're really good at communicating with people. So let's, in fast food, for example, maybe they don't have the skills to be on the grill, but they're a really good people person. So let's put them up front and let's let them talk to customers and try to, promote good customer service, things like that. So it's just being willing to, maybe make an adjustment and have them try something else.
Mm-hmm.
Be good. I think a good thing for me, because I've been in situations like that where I had no idea what I got myself into. And I just ended up, I don't know, if the drive is there to really want to know how to do what you're being taught, then I think it's just natural to try to figure out different ways to teach yourself the process, because I picked up a lot on just write it down. Even if you have to write down every single step of the process, that's okay. Write it down, and eventually you won't even have to look at the paper,
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what he was doing, but that's kind of a skill that you develop throughout the years of working. I think you learn how you best learn, sort of thing. So it kind of requires a bit on his end too.
Yeah.
So maybe that could become a conversation that I'd have, I guess, with that person.
How does sharing personal experience and being vulnerable, How does sharing personal experience and being vulnerable influence team dynamics? Think of the example of Sakaguchi. Do you have any personal examples of this in organizations you aren't involved in?
What was that about Sakaguchi?
Think of the example of Sakaguchi. Maybe I said it wrong. Sakaguchi. I'm going to share my screen, actually. Maybe that would help with these questions.
Is it just the agenda for today's discussion?
Yeah, this is what I'm looking at. And then what I was just reading is this question.
What the? Sharing personal experience, being vulnerable, influence team dynamics.
Was that the bang that we learned about?
Hold on a second.
I'm trying to think what that was.
I know. Oh my gosh, I've been reading questions from the wrong meeting. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, you're good. I had this one up, and so I was all maybe I just don't have the right questions. Okay.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
You're good. We're just advanced.
Well, I'm glad we talked about those derby foods. Oh my gosh, I feel so dumb. I was like going back and forth trying to find stuff. I'm like, what?
Oh, you're fine. We're just a week ahead now.
Yeah, we can probably.
Well, at least we talked about this stuff. Okay. Well, I'm just going to pull up this.
Well, that's okay because we applied a lot of the same questions to this case because
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. They have a lot of similarities.
Roger Quinn starting stuff. Yeah, we talk about culture and we do.
Mhm.
So I kind of like this question. What is Mary's role at the VP? How is she supporting the culture and how is she working against the culture? I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, like, because I really do think company cultures start with I'm not sure if she reports to a lot of people, but you really do start culture from yourself, if that makes sense. Like the management ultimately sets the scope, I think, for a lot of things, and people can choose to comply or not comply with that. But
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think it's kind of cool that it mentions how she has to work against the culture. Like, nobody likes that. Nobody is like, hey, that wasn't in the job description. Like, I wasn't supposed to be like somebody's intercessor, but sometimes that happens and you have to let someone know, like, hey, sorry, this isn't like okay. I don't know, that's just such an awkward position to be put in, but
yeah, I think it's interesting because I think it was another manager that had approached her, was like, you need to put a stop to this. This is ridiculous. It's not working. Like, I think that's interesting because it's like, ultimately she is responsible for all those people, but I almost wonder if like other people could have said something too. I don't know. I guess it depends on what their chain of command is and if they have any company policies with not harassment, but along those lines.
Well, what's good is that the person felt comfortable enough to go and like let her know, so like he was very honest, and he's all like, listen, I really can't stand this guy right now. And she's like way up there. She's VP. So being able to have that kind of culture between you and the other leaders is important. And so, yeah, at least she has that chain of communication very strong.
Yeah.
I feel like she's just in a tough position because, like, as a leader, I don't know. I feel like if I was in that position, there's like a time when to and when not to is like I don't know when to correct and when to like let the person kind of figure it out. And so, and I guess it's different where I think the guy's name's York, last name's York. He like already had one issue before, like at the brand meeting or whatever. And so, maybe it's kind of company policy or something like, okay, I'll give you a freebie and then your second time I'm going to tell you what's up. But I don't know. It's just interesting to see how different leaders act and handle situations.
I think it's interesting because it wasn't long after that discussion she had with the one guy who had complained about York, who was like, this needs to stop. She scheduled a meeting to talk with him. And I think that's a good indicator because a lot of times people are just like, well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers and I don't want to have to say much to anybody. And, who knows how aware she was of the problem with York being kind of a difficult person. But I think with like going kind of to this like culture, I think that's good that people are comfortable. I mean, it kind of says that York is probably comfortable doing his own thing. I mean, the company sounds successful. They've had good marketing. They've had good success with like the type of business they've done. He's a good worker, but just not a very not good bedside manner and just hard to work with. So I think there's a lot going for them, but he just needs some corrective principles. I don't think it's that bad. Like, he's a pain, but I think I think all that stuff could be amended, basically.
I think it's important as a leader to, be patient with individuals like that, to also not wait too long to make a corrective action, because individuals like that are like a cancer in a good culture. And if they're going to be, allowed to do whatever they want and treat people that way, pretty soon you're going to start, losing some valuable employees. And, that's only going to be to the detriment of the company. So I think it's important that, she takes it as an opportunity to kind of coach York on what he can improve on. But based on his attitude, doesn't look like it's going to be very well received.
There's a video I had to watch for a class, I think it was last semester, and it was a CEO talking to a group of people, and I can't remember what business it was she was a CEO for, but there was an employee who worked super hard, had all this limitless potential, great person, but he kind of committed a grave crime in the company, you could say, and I think he might have been a repeated offender, if you will, but she ended up firing him. A lot of people were just like, why? You could have done da-da. And she's like, well, I mean, that's my policy for everyone else. Why would I treat it any differently for this guy? And he had done a lot with the company and gone a long way, but it's like he made some really bad decisions and ended up biting him where it hurt. And I like what you brought up, Ernesto, like, so those people are difficult. And I think at that point, if he doesn't comply, then, it's like, all right, this is your first warning. If you can't make any changes, we have the right to let you know now. Otherwise, you're going to be terminated. Like, you're going to be dismissed from working here.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that video. It was Carly Fiorina when she was the CEO of HP.
Okay, that's right.
It was interesting going through the PowerPoint for this week and like reading through the training to give constructive feedback, because the more I read through it, the more I'm like, oh, well, it's basically just teaching you to talk with tact and to be very specific with what you're trying to get across, but to say it tactfully.
Yeah.
Right. And be like direct, like give a specific example of, don't just say like, oh, you're good at this. Like when you do this because of this, like, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It was a good review. I don't know.
Yeah. Kind of going off of that, there's these questions towards the bottom. Question 5, how should Mary approach the discussion with him? Like, what should she bring up? How can she reinforce the culture?
I think one way that she could bring it up is just say, look, I made some observations during the meeting. When you were speaking, your team looked a little uneasy, kind of looking down at the table, looking down at the ground. They couldn't wait for the meeting to be over. That's not the kind of environment that we want to create here. We understand that you want to demand excellence, but you also have to be a little flexible, and you really need to lead by example. Even though you think you may be doing things right, you have to also realize that other people have ideas. Especially it sounds from the case that a lot of the people, had been there a lot longer than York, but I don't know, just a thought, just say, hey, I noticed this during this meeting, and just kind of go from there.
I think that was really well said. Do you
I think
like,
also, go ahead.
I was just going to bring up, because I feel like this is kind of brought up in different companies too, but do you think group discussion, not to like throw him under the bus, but just to say, I don't know, to kind of remind and promote, there's companies who, not so much like a company retreat per se, but just kind of going over company policies, like not policy, but maybe just company culture about, I don't know how to describe it. It sounded better in my head before I spoke, but do you think approaching it with a group, not to throw him under the bus or specifically refer to that situation with the meeting, but do you think that would be beneficial?
I think it depends on the person, because I mean, some personalities won't react to that very well. And it kind of, depending on how the other people in the group are too, it could just end up sort of being public humiliation, depending on how much advantage they take of the situation, putting that person on the hot seat. So it might be good, but I kind of see it as not being so great. Like, thinking about how Christ taught people, especially when they made mistakes, he didn't often rebuke people in front of other people, sort of thing. If he did, it was very like to the side and just like a statement to that person, and they knew exactly what he was talking about when he said it. Either that, or he'd privately take them to the side, or it was just a quiet moment where he could talk to them. So.
Yeah, I really think that's the key. You don't want him, repeating the behavior that he did during the meeting. So rebuking him openly would be counterproductive. More otherwise, the message is going to come across, do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
But I've read a lot of business book over the years, and everybody, talking about dealing with difficult employees, it's always praise publicly, rebuke privately. Just take it as a teaching opportunity and say, hey, if you have a problem with an individual employee, take them aside. Don't embarrass them in front of the team. That way, you can set goals on things that they can work on, and they're not being ridiculed in front of peers. So I think the best way to motivate somebody is to take them aside, say, hey, you do this well, these areas you could improve on. Let's set some sort of plan in place for you to get here, and the rest of the team doesn't need to know that. So I think that you're going to get a much better response out of your team by approaching it that way.
Totally agree.
What do you think a leader, like in this case, Mary, how could someone like that change a culture, fix a culture, even just start a culture and maintain it, like a good, healthy, safe one is the word we were talking about earlier?
Is this referring to Mary, or is it referring to York?
Mary.
Mary. And I'm an early morning seminary teacher on Tuesdays. So I've been that's rough. There are a bunch of seniors, and so they're very opinionated, and they really don't care how you feel. Like, you have to bring the culture. They won't develop it on their own, and so it's kind of a struggle. But the more I strive to make it a culture of loving each other, understanding each other, and knowing that we don't always know the background of everyone. It's gradually brought the class closer together. It's kind of fantastic. I'm like, how did this happen? But it's had such a good positive impact. So I'm pretty sure if Mary kind of takes that own incentive to guide people to be mindful of others, you never lose when everybody's mindful about each other. It's kind of like in a relationship, like my husband and I, we kind of have a mindset of serving each other, and the more we serve each other, the more happier both of us will be, because no matter what I need to get done, he helps me with, and what he needs to get done, I help him with. And so it's just such a good balance. Like it's foolproof.
I think it comes down to being the change that you want to see. It has to start somewhere. If nobody's stepping up, if you don't like the culture, then create the culture. Be an example, be the good, be the change, and then pretty soon, as long as you're trying to help other people, achieve their goals and reach their potential, then, if people, notice that you're truly vested and want the best for them and not just, corporate America can be pretty cutthroat. Everybody thinks it's a win-lose situation. If I'm winning, then somebody else needs to be losing, or if I'm losing, somebody else is winning. There is such a thing as a win-win. And as long as you're, everybody on the team has kind of that attitude, we win together, we lose together, then people are much more open to collaborating and, trying to come up with the best solution.
Suzanne, were you like assigned to be the leader or the group discussion leader person?
Hold on just a second.
Or did you just like?
I didn't know who needed to be, so I was like, I'll just post a link.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's so nice.
I didn't know if that was something we had to like negotiate.
I actually have no idea. Let's see. I wanted to reach out and see if you had
I think that's a different class.
Yeah.
Man, you're a busy person.
Well, I actually have no idea, so I just figured I'd post a link just so it was there.
Nice. Do we want to negotiate like who hosts the next one, sort of thing?
Sure.
Okay. So I could cover the next one and be discussion leader for that one, and then whoever wants to be the next one, go ahead and shout out, and then we can just repeat that
cycle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Parker, do you want to be the next one, or
yeah, I'm happy
to
go after you.
Okay.
So I'll do the one in 2 weeks. But yeah.
So you'll do the 17th.
Right.
Okay, then I can do the 24th.
Okay, and hopefully, like each meeting, we can probably just follow up and be like, all right, you're still good for next week.
Yeah.
So it'll be good.
Mm-hmm.
Did this same time work for everybody, or did you want to? Because I remember originally like 6 o'clock, like Mountain Standard Time was talked about, and it kind of went back and forth. Some people were like, I can't do 7, so I was like, I don't know.
If anything, doing it earlier, like 5, I'd be happy. But if nobody else can do it, that's
I can. I'm pretty much good whenever, honestly.
Or I mean 6, not 5.
6 is good. 7's good.
Unfortunately for me, the later the better. I have about an hour commute home.
That's right. Okay.
So I think 7 would be probably the earliest I can do.
Okay.
No problem. That's totally okay.
That works for me.
Let's stick with 7, and then if anything needs to change, if we need to push it back, we can always do that too. But 7 sounds great to me. So.
All right. All right. Was there any?
Well, is that good for today's meeting?
I think so. We kind of went through a lot of this stuff. Sorry about I was so confused once I saw the week 4. I was like, wait, is that week 4 already?
Nah, you're good. You did great improving. I was really impressed.
Well, I'm glad that worked out. All right. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, stop share. There you go. And I'm going to